Jim is a local church leader who got in touch with Place for Hope recently. Jim was looking for support. He described a disagreement in his church between two elders. This was a seemingly simple disagreement about the use of a church room, but the disagreement had recently escalated into a full-blown conflict. It had taken many people by surprise. Jim found himself holding together a broken and very fragile situation with dignity and with grace. The two elders with whom Jim was working, each was threatening to resign if the other one didn't. Members of the church were feeling hurt, broken, confused, upset. And although the tip of the iceberg was the disagreement about the church room, in fact, it became clear very quickly that close under the surface, there had been bad, rude, and even bullying behavior going on for quite a long time. All of this erupted because of the disagreement about the use of one room. Jim, as the minister in that church, was doing his very best to bring the two sides together. In the midst of his busy life, he was managing to be what we call a non-anxious presence in the situation. He was finding and looking for ways to bring the two warring factions, as he called it, to sit in each other's company and to listen. Slowly they began to thaw, and light could be seen at the end of the tunnel, to such an extent that one of the elders even made a cup of tea for the other one. Jim is a peacemaker in his community. In the course of our conversations, Jim joked wryly about the seeming triviality of a so-called war about church rooms in the context of a worldwide ethnic violent situation, in the context of starvation, in the context of a refugee crisis often fueled by conflict. And Jim talked about the paradox of a church rooted in the gospel of peace and reconciliation, but yet being riven apart with people who found it difficult even to be in the same room as one another. In conversation, we came to the realization that some of the skills of deep listening, of compassion, of empathy, and of courage being exercised by Jim in his local community were the very same skills needed, perhaps in resolving world conflict. And we also acknowledged that if you look closely at the Bible, at stories of the early church's life, you'll find stories that are full of disagreement, sometimes of violent conflict, of difference of opinion, and you'll find stories of finding creative ways out. Two examples are to be found in Matthew chapter 18, for example, and in Acts chapter 6. Conflict is normal. Even in the Bible, conflict is normal. There's no doubt about that. But how we respond to conflict, that is the real challenge. Jim is a peacemaker in his community. And because of his work, Jim's church is now recognized as a place for hope in its community. Jim is a peacemaker. And it's my firm conviction that each of us here, each of us in our churches and our faith communities, each of us can be a peacemaker in our own community. We can help transform our local community into a place for hope. Why is this my conviction? What do I know about conflict transformation? Well, you might like to ask the folk I live with to have a really true sense of that. However, this is what I do know. Since 2009, Place for Hope has been involved in the world of conflict transformation, working tirelessly with churches and faith communities to move through times of transition and change, times of conflict, with grace, with compassion, and with hope. Place for Hope was born within the Church of Scotland, and we now work with many Church of Scotland congregations and ministers, but we're now an independent charity working across all denominations. We're not alone. We don't have the last word on conflict transformation, but we've got a little bit of experience. In this last 12-month period, with our team of 23 practitioners who always work in pairs, we have supported 97 separate communities throughout Scotland and the north of England. 64 of these cases have been working alongside local leaders in local church communities, with congregations going through times of transition. The other 33 cases were training or coaching or talks or lecture events. Why do people come to us for help? Well, we know that bad or rude behavior, sometimes the bullying that was experienced by Jim, can be a common cause of tension. These behaviors can often mask much deeper rifts or conflict underneath the surface. Other issues that call on us are a mismatch of expectations, different perspectives on theological issues, team or staffing issues, management, employment, and communication issues all rear their head. But from our experience, the most prevalent cause of tension in our faith communities right now is how to manage change, how to manage transition, whether helping a church transition through a time of vacancy, through a building closure, through a linkage or a union. Sometimes the differences that are hidden just close below the surface come up and hit us unexpectedly, as they did Jim in times of transition. Our churches and our faith communities are going through times of transition and change. But it's not only our churches that are going through times of change. We know that in our political world and in our social world, there is upheaval in our communities. And we believe that churches can be places of hope for their communities. So who knows what the future holds? None of us know what the future holds. But do you know, it's the way we host conversations now that matters. It's the tone with which we listen to one another that matters. It's the way we speak to one another that matters now. It's the tools and the time it takes to recalibrate ourselves in the midst of conflict now. This is what can make us peacemakers, and this is what shapes our future. So whether you find yourself sitting around your own kitchen table with the folk with whom you live, or your session room table, or whether you even find yourself around the number 10 Cabinet Office table, the Oval Office table, the United Nations peacemaking table, we believe that the same core skills of listening and of understanding are needed. And this work needs the talent of forgiveness and reconciliation too. These are tough asks, and it's hard work. But we're in this together. And we in Place for Hope are in the business of supporting local peacemakers throughout our faith communities so that each of our local communities can be a place for hope. So what does it take to be a peacemaker in our local communities, just like Jim? In Place for Hope, we focus on 5 key gifts to be a peacemaker. To be a peacemaker, we need to be self-aware. Henry Nouwen, the Catholic theologian, talked famously about the power of the wounded healer. By that, he meant that those with the gift of healing others are often those who are most able themselves to accept their own woundedness. And so similarly, we would say that to be a reconciler in the world, first we need to be open to exploring our own need for inner reconciliation within ourselves, honoring our own spiritual journey. And only then can we become wise companions to others who are seeking reconciliation. So the gift of self-awareness is one of the key gifts of a peacemaker. A second gift is to be at ease with conflict. When 2 parties are at war, they need to want to heal. They need to want to reconcile. Nothing we as peacemakers can do can bring reconciliation unless there's a willingness from the parties involved to walk towards conflict. And so as peacemakers, we ourselves are called to walk towards conflict, towards the difficult conversations, towards the uncomfortable places. This doesn't mean making ourselves unduly vulnerable, but it does mean being willing to live with discomfort, to live with disagreement, to live with conflict. The third gift of peacemaking is to have the courage to ask for help. We know that it can be difficult to live with tension, and we also know that it can be difficult for many folks in our churches. It can be uncomfortable and difficult to admit that things are going wrong, to admit that there's conflict, to ask for help. It takes courage to reach out and to say, I need some support here. We also know, however, that the sooner we do ask for help in a conflict situation, the more creative and the more effective can be the response. So peacemakers are people who have the courage to ask for help. The fourth gift of peacemakers is to be rooted in faith. We've already mentioned how our scriptures are full of stories of conflict and transformation, of hurt, forgiveness, reconciliation. These are not always easy stories, but these stories remind us that conflict is not new. Peacemakers are people who are content to draw on the complex wisdom of Scripture, the life of Jesus, the life of the early church, and from the scriptures of other faiths. And finally, the art of peacemaking needs folk who are willing to learn. We teach best when we learn well, however we learn. And so we know that we can become good peacemakers when we're willing to learn from other people, to be open to new ideas, and to continue on the path of lifelong learning. These are just 5 of the arts or the gifts to consider for peacemakers. And we believe in Place for Hope that all of us are and can be peacemakers. Through Place for Hope, we offer 3 core services to all in leadership in our churches and our faith communities who want to be peacemakers in the world. The first is companionship, accompaniment. Like the harmony that accompanies a good melody, we'll walk beside you through conflict. And we have 23 trained and supervised practitioners who'll facilitate difficult conversations, who'll walk with you for as long as it takes. The second offering we make is training and equipping. These are preventative courses. We offer training programs to introduce you to some of the core skills in conflict transformation, to help you understand the dynamics of conflict in a faith context, to explore more deeply what Scripture says about conflict, to address the questions of bullying and harassment. And the third service we offer is coaching. We can offer you one-to-one support, whether you're an individual leading a congregation, or you're part of a leadership team, or you're in a small group managing a project in your church or faith community. We can coach and support you from a distance as you yourself navigate a difficult conversation, navigate tensions in your church or faith community. And for all of these services and more resources, you can find out about Place for Hope at this website. But I'd like to leave you now with an image that speaks to us of beauty and wholeness in the midst of pain and conflict. There's a Japanese art form called kintsugi, the art of repairing broken pottery with lacquer, dusted or mixed with powdered gold. This art form treats a breakage and a repair of the breakage as part of the beautiful history of the object, and part of what makes that object even more beautiful, even more whole, even more valuable. Our understanding from a Christian perspective of forgiveness and reconciliation is that it is rooted in the ability to recognize that that which is broken and then repaired may reveal a deeper beauty than we may ever have known. I believe that each place of worship in this country can be a place for hope within its own community. And we know in Place for Hope that this is possible, where there are people like us, like Jim, who are on a personal journey towards reconciliation themselves, who are at ease in walking towards disagreement and conflict, who know when and how to ask for help, who are able to host difficult conversations, and who are on a journey of lifelong learning as faith-based reconcilers. So the more we can nurture peacemakers like this, like you, in our faith communities, the more equipped we will be to bring reconciliation to a wounded world. Thank you.